Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Returning listeners, great to have you back. New listeners of the channel, we're really glad you joined us. You're going to love what you hear. Look, one of the things we do at Salty Ginger Talk is we find awesome people to come on our podcast, talk about their lives, the good, more importantly, the tough stuff, what they've learned from it, and kind of walk you through how they've built the lives that they've built. And we always say that it's because of, not in spite of, the difficult things they've encountered. And our guest today is a prime example of that. So, Dr. Ashleigh Rankin is a doctor of psychology. She has a super interesting story. We're not going to spoil it by talking too much about it, but she and her husband have started up a practice whereby they both provide financial advice and investment advice and psychological advice around investing and how people think about money. Her story is super interesting and she is great at talking about it. Plus, she's a highly educated, well trained psychologist, just the kind of person we love having on Salty Ginger Talk. She joins a long list of awesome people. Without further ado, let's bring Dr. Rankin onto the podcast now. So, Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining us here on Salty Ginger Talk tonight.
You're welcome. I'm super excited to record today's episode.
Yeah, I've been really excited to bring you on to the channel since we had our initial conversation, and you have one of the more unique backstories of any guest that we've brought on. It's not simply because of that backstory I've been interested in bringing you on, but I just love the mentality at which you approach discussing it, and I love the work that you do now in the world. Some of it driven by those experiences, and I think there's such a great message through all of that that you're going to be able to convey to our listeners. So I've been really, really excited to have you on the podcast, and I'm glad that we're finally here. So, with all that said, let's just jump into it. So, would you mind kind of, and you can do this, what I like guests to do, if possible, is give kind of an overview of the arc of their life. Start with, I was a kid and I grew up and I went to school and blah, 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 blah. And then we'll go back and we'll do deep dives into all the stuff. But it's your story. You can tell it however you want. And the floor is yours.
Yeah, that sounds good. Um, I'm excited to share this. Looking back, like you said, it was pretty unique and it wasn't always positive. Like there was a lot of struggle in it for myself mentally, like developing and getting through everything. So getting to a point in my life where I can share this story and have a positive spin on it, like that didn't come super naturally. There was work to get there, but I'm excited that I'm here now and ready to share it. So I start back at the beginning. I was born in a small town and to a mom who was still in high school, so teenage mom, and that was really common in the town I grew up in. At one point, I think we were the highest for teenage pregnancy rates in the country, and the high school I even went to had a daycare built into it for the students to use, not the teachers. So, and there was
The
even a
high
class you
school?
could take. Yeah, and there was a class you could take that was an extracurricular activity, and it was literally working in the student daycare. So if you wanted to be a teacher or something like that, it was a good, extracurricular to add on. But yeah, our high school had a daycare built into it because there were so many kids and they were trying so hard to get these teen moms to graduate and actually do something with their lives and not feel like that's the end of their life. And I know that that statistic has dropped in more recent years, which is a good thing. But I was a product of that. And my parents, the story I was told was my parents met through church. And then church led to them having me. And my dad's side was extremely wealthy. His father was a pediatrician and he owned the doctor's office in town and part of the hospital and ran some other clinics in some other towns. And then my mom's side was lower middle class. I was really living off of my grandma's salary, and she was an elementary school teacher. So it wasn't the end of the world poverty, but with my mom, as she tried to like move out and be on her own, we lived in a house with dirt floors that was really small. And she had two more kids after she graduated high school with somebody else. And so it was me and my two brothers growing up in this we're sharing a bedroom that didn't have finished flooring in it. In fact, when they tore that house down after my mom sold it years later, they found out that the insulation in the house was newspaper from like the 1930s. So
Mm.
there was like, it was just this really like sad little stick house that we grew up in a dirt yard on the edge of a cotton field. But growing up there, I didn't know my father's side. So that's like the very unique side of my story when I tell a lot of people it. My father's side was extremely religious, and they were very upset with my father having a child out of wedlock in high school. And again, a lot of these are secondhand stories, you know, because I was so small when everything was happening, or not even born yet. But the story I was told is my grandfather's lawyer told him, like, don't have anything to do with this kid. So he gave my father an ultimatum: I'll pay for you to go to college, or you can go off and raise this child and not have anything to do with the family, be disowned from the family. And my father chose college. So I was raised without knowing my father. And my childhood was pretty rough. There was a lot of poverty in it. And I went to some really rough schools, public schools. And I was like determined to do something with my life from a very young age. I did have um, a great aunt who had her doctorate, and she was a big inspiration for me. And my grandmother had worked hard to get her master's when I was older, and that was a good inspiration for me as well. I'm really close with both of them, so that really pushed me. I remember being in third grade and like determined that I'm going to get a doctorate at some point in my life, and I held that determination as I went through school. And I worked a lot. I started working my first job at 15. I was going to school and working and trying to do the extracurricular activities and keep my grades up so I could get into a college and moving forward. And I remember I went to take the SAT and ACTs and I couldn't afford them. So I never took them. But I found out if you go to community college first and you get your associate's degree, you can transfer into a 4-year school without taking the SAT or the ACT. I don't know if that's still true, but it was when I was going to school. So I took advantage of that, and I ended up getting through school and then going to community college. And my second year of community college, so I'm entering my 20s, I got in touch with my father. I ended up calling him because I just was curious, wanted to know, had heard about him. Growing up, his parents attended the same church that I went to, and I knew who they were, but they did not acknowledge me as a part of their family. And I went to the doctor's office that they ran. So going to like into the community, I would hear about them a lot, especially because he was a philanthropist in the community and very like paying for this kid to go to camp or this kid to have tennis lessons and all of these things that I couldn't afford as a kid, but I would hear that my grandfather was paying for all these things. So eventually I reached out to my dad. And I remember I called my grandmother. She answered the phone. I looked the phone number up in the phone book, and I called him and I asked for my father's information. And she said she'd been waiting for this day for, at that point, like 22 years. And she did give me his phone number. So I called him and I reached out to him, and that started our relationship. Like 2 years later, I was finishing community college, and about a year later, and then looking for a 4-year university to attend. And I had made it through community college on scholarships, and I had some scholarships for university, but I didn't have enough to cover everything, especially moving and leaving a job to find a job in another city and all this stuff. So my grandmother on my father's side offered to pay the tuition for my schooling. And at first I said no, and I was determined to figure it out on my own. I didn't want them to think that that's why I had reached out to them, was because they had money.
Hmm.
So I kept declining her offer. And then after like a year, my now husband, at the time we were dating, he was like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, they want to help. You guys have a relationship now. So take it and like, you know, move forward with it and better your life with it. They've put a lot of kids through college over the years. They've sponsored a lot of kids to go to college in different countries even. So he was like, you're one more, you know, project that they've done. That's probably a terrible way to say it, but that's what, you know, he was like, they've done this for so many people. Just go ahead and take advantage of it and use it for something better. You're going to go just as far. So I did. I finally offered, or accepted their offer. And then I moved forward and I went to university and got my undergraduate degrees in criminal justice and psychology. And I really wanted to either go into the medical field or go into law and politics. And I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. And I realized I was in my last semester of my undergrad and I had to pick. And I ended up wanting to go into the medical field. And then my grandfather was like, I'll pay for it, but I don't want you to become an MD because the field is changing so much. I feel like there's other areas that you could help more people in. And he was an MD himself. So I mulled that over a little bit because at first that's what I want to do, but eventually I landed on clinical psychology. And I've loved the impact that it had on helping people with something that was much deeper than just a health issue, from like the standardized American health issues. And I love that the field was growing and that it was something that every human needed. Like, not every human needs a treatment for something, but every human does need mental health, and it really needs an advocate in it. And so that really attracted me to the field. So I went forward and I got my master's in psychology and then my doctorate in clinical psychology. And I graduated in 2018 with my doctorate in clinical psychology. I worked for hospitals and universities and private practice. And then eventually, a few years ago, after the COVID stuff kind of mixed everything up, I really started to like the online approach. And my husband, he does he's a investing advisor. So he does a lot of the financial stuff behind the scenes, but then he also works with clients. And I started to get really attracted to that field, particularly because I would say 60% of my clients, one of the major issues they were facing was finances. That was impacting their mental health from one way or another. And our field wasn't addressing it at all. It really wasn't. It was very taboo for us to even talk about finances with our clients. And I felt like there was something missing there. There was a niche. So I started to explore financial psychology. And a few years ago, I left clinical and moved over into financial. And now my husband and I launched a business together where we're doing financial psychology and investment advising side by side. And that's been really fun. And it's allowed us to travel a lot, because my client load is different. So that's where I've ended up. And it's not I feel like I'm never on the traditional approach for anything. I didn't take traditional approaches to get through school. I didn't when I was younger. And if I did, I wouldn't even be where I am today, because traditionally in the community I grew up in, you don't become a doctor, and you have a kid at like 16 to 18 and you settle down and you stay in the town and you work for a prison or a factory. If you're doing well, that's what you're doing. And if you're not, then it's even worse than that. So the non-traditional approach, I feel like, flows well with me because I'm always against that. But I am in a very like unique position in my field right now and doing something that a lot of people don't know about, which is kind of fun. And my relationship with my father, to go back to that, has been going really well. I've got to know his family a lot, and it was strange at first. When I was like 24, I went to Colorado with him to a funeral. It was his mother's mom. So it would have been my great grandmother, who I never met. And they kept introducing me at the funeral and the family. And I found out before this that they never told anyone I existed. So the whole family was like, who's this person? And they would say like, oh, this is our granddaughter who's like 24. And they were like, who did you marry into the family? And they're like, no, Sterling had her. That's my father. But, he had her. And they were just like flabbergasted. Like they're like, okay, but who did you marry? Like they just could not grasp that I was a grown person standing in front of them who was a blood relative. And so that was kind of a crazy experience. And I met my great aunt. So on my grandfather's side, the first Christmas I spent with her, I remember she flew out and she could not stop staring at me. Like her mouth was just like hanging on the floor because she had this great niece who was in her 20s that she had no idea existed. And I guess she was very close with her brother, my grandfather. So it was like this shocking secret to come out. And everybody like politely addressed it. Nobody really came out of the woodwork and said anything about it, but you could see that they were really trying to absorb this. And I found out later, I met her daughter, and her daughter and I look like we could be sisters, which is crazy because I've never met, most of that family, and I didn't look a lot like their family, but her daughter and we really look like we could be sisters. So now I understand why she was staring at me like in such a gasp, like, who is this person that looks like my daughter? That made so much more sense to me. And I've learned little stories along the way, like speaking to my aunt, my father's sister. She was younger. She was in junior high when I came about. And so she kind of witnessed this. And she said her and her mother were very much against me not being a part of the family. But my father and his father were very much like, don't talk about it. It didn't happen. Just leave it alone. So the family was very divided in it. And they're still together. They had a great marriage. My aunt and her brother, my father, they talk and they have a great relationship. So the family held it well, but they were very divided on how to approach the subject of me and what to do with it. So I do feel like I kind of brought them back together a little bit when I came back into the picture. My grandmother did tell me that one time. She said they hadn't had Christmas together in like 10 years. And then the Christmas I came back and did it my first Christmas with them in my 20s, they had a Christmas together because of me. And then every Christmas since then, they've always been together. So I was a little shocked to hear that because I always saw them together and thought I was just joining in. But I later learned that I kind of like pieced their family back together a little bit. And my grandfather's passed. He passed a couple of years ago, but I had a really good relationship with him. And like I said, my relationship with my father and his sister are really good. And I'm really close with my grandmother. And she's kind of fun. I have this love for traveling that my mom's side didn't really have, and I didn't know where it came from. And I found out it came from her, my grandmother. She's in Africa right now. Like she just travels. She's in her 70s and she went to Africa by herself last week. So she's super excited to travel the world still. So I do feel like I'm seeing connections and things and learning stuff about myself, even now in my mid 30s that I always had questions for. So I felt like overall it was really positive for me to reach out and make this connection with my family that originally I wasn't sure. And a lot of people were like, why do you want to do this? You know, they don't want anything to do with you and it's going to be hard for you to absorb it. My mom was really scared for me to do it. I remember when I didn't tell her I was going to do this when I reached out. I just did it on my own and then told her I'm starting to like speak with them and make this connection with them. And overall, it's been great. Like we've really healed, I think, on both sides, like I said, and grown together a lot, and especially in the last 10, 12 years. And they helped me get through college, which really was life-changing for me. But there was, when I highlighted earlier, there was like pieces of it that I felt like I needed to work on. I felt like, especially with like growing up in poverty and struggling a lot, when I was going into my late teens and early 20s, I had a lot of anger with the world and like, why did I have to live this way? And why is there so much suffering in general? And like really struggling with these big questions. And it took me a lot of my 20s. And I think my degree really helped with this, where I was able to be enlightened a little bit and provide back to myself what I would give to my clients. I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I was always trying to figure out how to move forward mentally myself. But I could really see, like, with the self reflection and growth, that I was getting through this piece of my life that was my life up until that point. But I had to like really work to get to a place where I could see the positive in these relationships and the positive in the world and like everything around it, even in the suffering. Like I got to a place where it was accepting that that's a part of life and that's what people go through, and myself included, and that we can grow from it. Really, we can. And without it, we don't grow even. um there's a balance in everything, and I think that that's part of it. But I did put a lot of work into that, and I did feel, I was reflecting on this the other day, I felt a little sad for myself that I was so angry in part of my 20s. I was thinking about that the other day, like, hindsight's 2020, and not beating myself up over it because that's not where it's at. But I did think if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be to just let it go and let it grow, like move forward with it. But don't be so angry because you're losing a piece of your youth inside of it. I really, looking back, it felt like I lost some of that. But it made me who I am today. So I don't think it was all for nothing. It just took a lot of growth to get to a place where I felt really good with those relationships, with my other relationships, because that impacted it, and with where my life is today, just in general. It's kind of like a nutshell, because moving as fast as I can and telling all of that story.
My word. There
Yeah.
is so much to talk about there. First off, let me just thank you for being so open and candid about it. I know that sometimes for people that is difficult, and I respect the fact that you said, different stages of your life, it probably would have been difficult, but you've gotten to this stage now where you can talk through it. And I think there's so many valuable lessons you've alluded to and talked about some of them kind of at a surface level, but I think we can dig into those as we have our conversation. So let me go back. I want to make sure that I really and truly understand the scenario. So
Yeah.
did you know as a young girl that the doctor you were seeing and the people you were going to church with were in fact your family on your dad's side and they just refused to acknowledge that relationship? Or did you not know that till later in your life?
I knew I can, when I'm thinking back, I know around the age of 5, I realized that my father wasn't in my picture at all. Like, and up to 5, like he was never there. He wasn't there from birth on. To the point that my mom wasn't sure if she was going to put me up for adoption until after I was born. So I was at my own baby shower because my mom like decided to keep me and then they had a baby shower.
Mm,
But when I was about 5, I felt like there was like a light bulb that clicked on that was like, oh, you're not like other kids. You don't have a father. And my first brother was born then and he had a father. They were married. And he and my mom did not stay together for long either. She ended up being divorced and single for a while throughout my childhood. But I saw that they had a father and I didn't. My brothers, as they were coming into the picture. And I think when I was about I knew when I was 5 that I didn't have it. And I remember talking to my mom, like, why don't I have a father? And she was like, he's just not in the picture. And then I think when I was about 7 or 8, so like somewhere between first and third grade, but around second grade, I figured out that that family was my dad's side of the family. But my father didn't live in the town anymore. So I didn't know what he looked like or who he was until I was in my 20s. But I knew his mother and father. I knew who they were by the time I was about 8. It was very clear to me. And I remember going to church and like the whole community just loved my grandparents. And I would hear people talk about them all the time. My friends, he was their doctor. And I had friends that like I said, paid for them to go to camp one year or sponsored them for a tennis coach or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that is so crazy that that's my grandfather, but I have nothing to do with it. And I don't even know if he knows who I am. He did, but in my mind, I didn't know that. So I like really struggled. And I think that's where a lot of that anger when I was in my teens and 20s came from, was like watching these people around me have this relationship with him when I was being ignored. But to answer your question, I really didn't put that together until I was 7 or 8, I would say, trying to think back. That's about the time it was like very clear to me that I know who these people are and everybody in the community knows who these people are and they do not want anything to do with me. And I was
how
very
did you
polite. Oh,
how,
sorry.
how did you figure it out?
Um so I snuck into my mom's paperwork and I found paperwork from way back when with my father's last name on it, which was their last name. And I realized that I traced it through the phone book that those were his parents. And this was pre-internet, so I was
Right,
digging
yeah,
through
yeah.
like old papers and phone books. And again, I was like 8, so I was kind of putting this together. And then I went to my grandma because I was pretty nervous to go to my mom with this. I think my mom was so young and she was like struggling with it as well, that it was a hard topic for her to talk about. And I could see that at a very young age. My grandmother was much more open with me and she treated me like more of her daughter than her granddaughter because she was in her early 40s when I was born. So a lot of people thought I was my grandmother's child. But I was really close with her. So I went to her and was like, are these my grandparents? Is this my father's name? And she was like, yeah, that's who they are. and then back to what I was going to say, I was a very polite kid.
Mm.
So my grandmother was like, just leave it lie for now, and don't make a fuss over it. And your, your life is where it's supposed to be. And so I really listened to her on that. And I never said it like, I remember at church, there was times where I wanted to shout it, like, or at school, times where I wanted to shout it, like, those are my grandparents, but I never said it to anyone in public. When I got a little older, like high school, like junior, senior year, as I was starting to really wonder this, I would confide in a few like close friends, like, yeah, those are my grandparents, but I don't really know them. But when I was younger, I didn't mutter it at all. I didn't even know what to do with it. So I would see them and keep my distance. And I learned later through my aunt that she told me the doctor's office they had, I remember as a kid, it was 2 stories, and the second story had like offices with glass windows that overlooked the like waiting room in the first story. And she said that her mom, she was a nurse, and then her husband, my grandfather, was a doctor, and they ran this office together. But her mom, my grandmother, would, every time I had an appointment, would watch me from the window upstairs and would like check in to see how I was doing and what I needed. And then when I was in high school, I remember, like, even right after high school, right before I had contacted them to have a relationship with them, I had a bill from that doctor's office. I think it was like right after I turned 18. So then I was on my own health insurance, and I was trying to figure out how to be an adult with bills and stuff. And I had a bill from them, and I went into the doctor's office to pay it, and it was gone. And I was so confused. Like, I know I owe you guys money. And they were like, no, you don't owe us anything. It's already taken care of. And I was just like super confused. I remember being very confused on that. And later it clicked for me like, oh, they were watching and they took care of that bill. So my grandmother was like always, I felt like keeping an eye on me from the distance, but wasn't allowed to interact or speak with me as the family rule on their side. And I personally just kept that distance as well. So we did not interact until I was in my 20s.
And what drove, what do you, maybe you know, maybe you don't, but what do you think drove their thought process to the approach? Was it a religious thing because you were born out of wedlock? Was it because they were worried about it impacting their son's future? Why do you think they took this approach?
I think it was a mixture of those. Being born out of wedlock in a strong Christian community, that and the bureaucratics of the church. When I was in high school, the pastor, he had adopted 2 girls, and his girls, it was right after high school, so they were entering high school, and one of them got pregnant, and the church got rid of the pastor. And I remember seeing that and going, oh my gosh, no wonder my grandparents being involved in the same community, no wonder they were so fearful of bringing out that their son had done that. And then they also had a very strong, good reputation in the community. And I think part of it was to protect their reputation. Um, they didn't want anyone to know that their teenage son had had a kid of his own. And then the right before my grandfather passed away, like in the last year of his life, my husband and we've been married 11 years now. So he's gotten to know the family, and he's been around a lot too. And he knows this story. But we were at their house for dinner, and I was off helping with something. And my husband went to the backyard with my grandfather, and they were looking at like a garden or something. And my grandfather told my husband that he was really sad that he made that decision, getting to know me now, and that he felt a lot of regret, and I felt like he was reflecting because he knew his life was ending, but he felt a lot of regret on it. And he said that he made the decision because his lawyer told him to. So he said it was strictly a business decision, which is crazy to hear, like making that decision over a kid. I don't know if it was because my family didn't have a lot of money and the lawyer thought that family's going to come after you for money because of this kid, or if it was because of his reputation in the community. I'm not sure what the lawyer was thinking in that, and how much of that is, I'm not saying my grandfather's lying when he's saying that. I believe that conversation happened, but I don't know how much of that was guided by him versus guided by the lawyer. But there was some sort of decision made. I think finances were a big part of it. I think they were nervous that my mom's side was going to want money, and they never did. My father did pay child support throughout the years to my mother. Like quietly, she got a check in the mail every month, and that was it. But they never like reached out and made a connection beyond that. So I really wonder how much of it was like protecting finances, but I do think a lot of it was reputation and their religious beliefs as well, and the reputation that comes with the religious beliefs. That felt like a big factor of it. Personally, that felt like a big factor of it. I was kind of shocked to hear the lawyer comment. My husband told me about it after they had a conversation. He said that to him. He never said it to me, but he did say it to my husband. So I'm not sure how much that had to weigh in it. But personally, I always believed that it was a combination of their reputation in the community and the beliefs of the church.
Wow, it's just so wild to think about this whole scenario playing out for all these years in a small town too. I mean, it's not like you're in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles where there's millions of people floating around. I mean, these are people you interact with all the time. It's just and look, the world's different now than it used to be for sure.
Yeah.
But still, it's just so crazy. Talk a little bit about the anger you felt. How did that manifest itself in you? Was it just internal feelings? Was it thoughts? Did you act out? What did you do with that anger when you felt it?
Um, I think it started as like low self-esteem as a kid, not feeling wanted. My relationship with my mother was always up and down. Part of it was because she was still a kid herself. But I felt like in the beginning, I wasn't an angry kid, and I think back on that a lot. Like, when did the anger manifest in me? I was like a sad kid. Like, I just really struggled. I struggled in the community and making friends because I was poor and I wore glasses as a kid. So that was like not. I feel like now that that's shifted and that's kind of a cool thing now. But when I was a kid, it was not cool to wear glasses.
Totally.
So I've had some stuff going against me. Yeah. And I just struggled. I struggled to make friends. And then I struggled inside my family, and I struggled with poverty. And I felt like as a junior high and high school student, I really had low self esteem. And I don't think I carried that on the outside. That was very internal. I stuffed it very far down. But I really did struggle, and I struggled in my home life. My mom dated some guys that weren't very nice, and I struggled with those relationships. And uh, my brothers and I had good relationships, but they were also struggling with their own demons. Their father had a lot of drug issues and was in and out of prison, which is why my mom and him ended up divorced. So there was just a lot of like turmoil growing up that I manifested into like a sadness. And then when I became like a young adult, late teen, early 20s, that sadness, I think, turned into anger, which often it does. We, as a psychologist, we look at primary and secondary emotions, and a primary emotion is sadness, and a secondary emotion from that is anger. And so I could see that, like, at the time I didn't know that, but I could see that now reflecting back, that sadness really shifted into anger. And I think it's as I was trying to get my footing and be more independent and have some self-esteem as an adult, especially making my way through college and grad school, which can be really ruthless. Getting straight A's and like having to maintain yourself in a professional environment and all these things. But I could feel that like sadness manifesting into anger. And I think it's because I wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't looking at it. I knew it was there. I wasn't ignoring it. I wasn't delusional or acting like it didn't happen in any way. But I wasn't healing it either. It was just kind of manifesting. And it really did turn into anger. And that anger, for me, it was like getting to the point where I was struggling to maintain myself in stressful situations. I wasn't like going off the rails, but I could see like the steam coming up, and I could feel the pressure. And I thought, this isn't like a healthy way for me to handle these situations. Eventually, and I could see it impacting my relationship with my husband. We were newlyweds. We got married right before I started grad school, and I could see him starting to like have to deal with the anger that I had. I would come home and I'd be really tired and stressed, and that would come out as like snappy sometimes, or I could catch myself like just being really negative when I used to be a very positive person. And I realized very quickly I did not want to be that person. And I didn't want my husband to suffer through that. It's not his place to carry those. As much as I love him, as much as he probably would, I didn't want him to have to go through that either. So I started to, as I was getting my master's and doctorate, I started to like, I'm very much a look at the world through my eyes to try and understand with more than just empathy, but maybe have some sympathy if I can find a way to relate. And I take that into my practice very seriously. But with my schooling and my clinical development, I started to apply all of this to myself. Like, I need to figure this out. And my school was very big on self-awareness. I remember one time I was speaking with the dean of students as I was finishing my school career. And he was like, I've never seen a program that is so like in tune with self-awareness and pushing self-growth. They really pushed it on us to be reflective and to grow before we become therapists and go out into the world to help other people, which I think is very appropriate and what we should be doing. But I took that very seriously. And I feel like those are like those years, the 4 years I was in grad school just like were transformative for myself. I was able to take a lot of that anger and process it and figure out how to heal and figure out how to cope and move forward to the point that now I don't feel like it's any part of my life. I feel very like at peace with where everything's at and at peace with my father's side of the family and my mother's side of the family and my relationships. But I do see that I had to go through so much growth in between there to get to that place. It wasn't going to come on its own. I don't think I think if I had left it alone and thought, oh, it'll just go away, I think it would have continued to manifest and become an even bigger problem with anger. And who knows, like more sadness, depression can manifest from that. Like they go back and forth, they play together. And I see that in a lot of clients. And again, it makes me, I think, a better therapist where I can relate to them more and help them like truly understand what's happening and then help them truly figure out how to move forward with something. But there was so much self-growth in there that I had to deal with, and so much I had to like take apart and have patience. It doesn't heal overnight, even if you want it to. And that was really frustrating for me. Like I can see it, I can see that I'm fixing it, but it's still there. Why? Getting through all of that. And I think as you get older, you have, most people, I think they have some more patience and understanding as they get older. So using that to my advantage as I aged and being able to like move forward and use that as another skill, all of that in combination helped me really like heal and get to a place of peace. But there was a while, I feel like there was about 10 years in my life where I just felt really angry with the world. And again, I didn't wear it on my sleeve. A lot of people didn't see it. I don't think my dad's side's ever seen that. My husband saw some of it, but that's because we're so close. And he was the one who, again, was patient with me in all of it. And it helped us grow as a couple too. But again, I think if I hadn't have worked on it, then we wouldn't be where we are today, and I wouldn't be where I am today with anything else.
Yeah, it's it's one of the things we talk about a lot on our podcast is that, we have really, including you, we have really high caliber guests come on our podcast because like the subjects that we talk about, it's people's lives and what they've learned from their lives to build the life and careers that they have now. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, um, you have to be willing to go through all that to get to where you want to be. And as you were talking, like, where did this, you are not, you are where you are because of what you went through, not in spite of what you went through. But with that said, I mean, you had tough circumstances. Where do you think the drive came from to go through school and to pursue the path that you pursued? Because it wasn't glaringly obvious. There wasn't like, neon signs saying, go to college, become a psychologist, get your doctorate. Where do you think that came from?
I do think about that a lot because I have two younger brothers, half brothers, and the youngest of the three of us has really struggled with life. He's still kind of floundering and he's in his 30s, and he doesn't have that drive And then my middle brother, he's like kind of in between the two. He's got some drive, but he also floundered a little bit and struggled. And neither one of them went to college. They didn't at all. They didn't have a desire to. And my cousins, none of them have gone to college. On my mom's side. And on my father's side, I'm the only child. My aunt never had children. My father never had any other child. I'm the end of the bloodline on that side. So there's no one to compare to over there. But on my mother's side, I have a lot of comparison. And I'm very much ahead of a lot of the family, a lot of my cousins and stuff like that. And some of them are still younger and developing, but that drive definitely isn't there in the family. I'm really the black sheep with that. I see it in extended family, like my great aunt and my grandmother. She was a very driven woman, and a good role model, but never pushing me to get my doctorate or telling me I had to go to school or anything like that. In fact, my mom was like, don't go to college. Nobody cares. And the schools I went to, like high school and junior high, they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. Sure, you're going to get a doctorate, whatever. For me personally, I felt like that drive came from wanting a better life. Like I had that desire to travel, which I was like, I don't know where I get this from, but I had it. And I really, really, really wanted to travel and see the world. And the other piece of it was I wanted a more comfortable life. I didn't want to live in poverty. I didn't want to live in turmoil. I could see what that impact had on me personally, on my family around me. And I just wanted something better for myself. And I don't have children. I'm turning 36 in a couple of months. And my husband and I, we never had a desire to have kids. He knew before we got married that I didn't have a strong desire to have kids. And part of it was I raised a lot of my cousins as a kid. There wasn't a like responsible adult in the room. And so I was the one who was picking up a lot of that. And that kind of turned me off to wanting to have kids when I was older. And I saw how hard it was. And the other half of it was like, I just felt like it's such a responsibility to bring a life into the world and then to make them live through something like that. And so I always told my husband, if we ever had children, I've always felt like I wanted to be in a place where they could be really comfortable. And they always say, there's that saying, like, I always mix it up, but soft men make soft times, which makes hard men, which makes hard times, or something like that. There's a saying in there that's passed around, which the gestalt of it is like, of course, if I had hard times, I want to pass soft times on to my kids, but then my kids will be soft and then hard times will come for the next round. And it kind of bounces through the generations. So you can see that. But I really felt that. I felt if I ever had a child, I did not want them to have the life that I had. So, but I didn't do it to have a kid, clearly, because I don't have any. But I did do it for myself. More than anything else, I wanted to have a comfortable life moving forward, and I wanted to do something. And I really wanted to see the world and interact with it. And I knew that that was a privilege, and a privilege that I had to bestow upon myself. It wasn't going to fall in my lap. So I worked really, really hard to get to a place where I felt very comfortable in my own life. And I think I was fortunate that I had the foresight to see that as a teenager. Most of the people I went to high school with didn't go to college. And a lot of them still live that same lifestyle that they've been passed down from their parents. And I felt like I just didn't want to do it. I could see that as a teenager that I didn't want to do that. I was a waitress waiting tables on graveyard shift in high school. And people would be like, what are you doing here? And I'd be like, getting out of here. I'm saving all my money for college and I'm moving on. Like, but that was always my drive, whether it was to carry a job or to get into a school. My drive was to give myself a better life. Where that came from, like ultimately, I feel like it's a lot like resilience, which is kind of a debated topic in psychology. But having that resilience and having that drive, I don't know if it's innate or if it's something that can be fostered. I think the true answer is it's both nature and nurture. But there definitely is something there psychologically. And if we could ever tap into exactly what it is that turns that on for people, then I'm sure that they would take advantage of that and move that forward for other people. But I think there is something there that's innate that I was born with that gave me that drive as well. Good genes, I don't know. But there's something there that really pushed me forward. And again, that foresight, like, I don't know how I could see the world and for what it was worth, and that if I pushed hard, I could do something better, but it took a lot of work. But I refused to let it go. I had a professor in grad school. I was like my third year in, and I was really frustrated. The further you get into the medical system, the more you see how corrupt it is behind the scenes.
Mm.
I think a lot of Americans are seeing that now. Just in general, you're starting to see a lot of that. It's a very hot topic in politics and everything else. But I was learning that as I was going through, and I was getting more frustrated. And I'm very much an advocate, and that justice, like, I'm always going out for that for my clients. And I had a professor come to me, and he was like, maybe this isn't the field for you because you're struggling so much with the corruption.
Mm.
And I was like, maybe change it. But I refused to let it go. He wanted me to drop out of school. And I was like, I'm not dropping out because of this, but I will keep fighting it. So I don't know. I've just always had that drive in me like that, where once I lock in on something, I'm not going to stop. It's the same with publishing books or anything else I do. Like, once I lock into it, it's happening. Planning a vacation's the same way. My husband jokes about that, but if somebody's like, let's go here, I'm planning it the next week, and they're like, oh, I didn't know we were serious when we were talking about it. I'm like, I'm always serious, let's go. But I am very much a, like, if you really really want it and you push for it with a realistic boundary, you can achieve a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, and like, you're trained in this. I sell groceries for a living. So if Dr. Rankin and I disagree, I can tell you which one of us you should listen to, and it's not me. But um you see people who are in a particular set of circumstances simultaneously, and one will go this direction with it, the other will go this direction with it. And that can be lots of different things. I always look back like on my childhood. So my wife and I have been together 33 years, and we have three sons together. And neither of us had a burning desire to be parents. We didn't not want to be parents, but you know how some people like have that, I can't wait till I have kids. I never had that. My wife never had that either. And we love our sons very
Yeah.
much. Our life wouldn't be the same without them for sure. But I knew very early on that I wanted to be in a good marriage because my parents fought and argued a lot. And they wound up getting divorced right after my wife and I got married. But they'd been together for about 25 years, and they probably should have divorced about 10 years before they did. But they, stuck together for the kids. And I can remember being 7, 8, 9 years old and getting sent to my room to sit on my bed so my parents could argue with each other. And I don't ever remember
Yeah.
anything being physical, but they were not nice to each other. They would call each other names, and they just were not nice to each other. And I can remember sitting there at that age saying, you know what? When I grow up, I'm going to be in a good marriage. I'm going to have an awesome wife. And that was really important to me from a very young age. And that's exactly what I did. Like, I was fortunate that I'm smart and I was a good athlete. And, I'm 53. So when I was growing up, those are things, and they still do, but those were things that had a really high social currency for men. And so I knew I didn't have to settle, and I didn't. I married exactly the person that I wanted to marry. And my wife is smart and pretty and an outstanding person on top of all that. And so she didn't have to settle. So she didn't either. But you could put someone in the same situation I was, and they would model that and take it and go into a dysfunctional marriage and say, this is, must be what marriage is like. I must have to be a jerk and call my wife names, and she must have to hate me and call me names and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then, like, you were in your situation, and instead of modeling what you saw, it drove you to want something different. And I just find it so interesting that people react so differently to very similar circumstances. And it's really hard to predict who's going to do what. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it is, especially when you're young. I mean, maybe there was like a moment where you saw a good relationship and realized they existed and that's what you wanted, or somebody else was talking about it and you realized it. I do feel like exposure helps a lot. Like, if I didn't know anyone who didn't have a doctorate, then maybe I would never have gotten a doctorate. I don't know. But I do think that there's like moments that we don't realize that are influencing us, right? Especially when we're kids. They talk about kids being a parrot and mimicking everything and soaking everything in more than we give them credit for. And I do think that's true. I think there's all these things, and predicting even then what's going to happen. Like you said, two people in the same situation, they go in different directions, and who knows why? Who knows how much of it is genetic versus upbringing? There's a big mix of everything, and just one tiny piece of it being in a different direction can skew everything else. I do think one of the things that I've like often told my brothers, and others, but I remember saying it a lot as a kid and saying it a lot as a young adult with them as they were growing up, is we have good models. They're just good models of what not to be. So like always holding on that there's a model to, like there's something in it. And another piece is settling, like you said, like you did not settle. I do think a lot of people feel like they have to when they don't. And having that drive to not settle is a big piece of it. I have a lot of people that I know personally that we grew up together, and then I see where they're at and I feel like they settled. And not, not all my friends are like that, or not all the people I know are like that, but I do see that where I see people who could have went in a different direction. They very much had the tools to, but they decided to settle and not use them instead for whatever reason. Maybe they thought they couldn't do it. Maybe, it was a self-esteem thing. Maybe they really didn't want it. Maybe they were okay with how it was. Maybe they were not very motivated. There's so many circumstances that add into that, and trying to figure out exactly why each person does what they do is so hard. Even for ourselves, trying to figure out what we do sometimes is so hard. It is a fascinating thing to sit back and watch. One thing that I really feel adamant about, and I've tried to hold on to this, as I've gotten older, is you can always change. Always. Like, my grandmother wanted to write a book, and she was turning 80, and I was like, let's do it. So we published a book together. And I've had people come up like, oh, I want to do that, but I'm too old. And I'm like, my grandma was 80 and I got her to do it. So go for it. Like, if you want to do something, don't, age is a number, but like, it's your life, you're still living it. So fight for it and don't settle and try to figure it out. And sometimes we make wrong turns. That's okay. Just turn around and go back the other way, or make another wrong turn and see if you end up right. Two wrongs make a right, right? Like, there's always a way to get around it or find something. And maybe learn something a little later, but take it into account and keep moving forward. The same with your health or working out or whatever it is. I really feel like as a human, if you're still alive, you have a chance to fix something or a chance to change something. So just keeping that in mind, no matter how old you are, what circumstance you're in, there's always another option. Always. It's just whether or not you want to take it or use it or go for it, put the work in for it. Sometimes that's a big piece of it, is putting the work in for it. I do feel like a lot of people struggle with that piece of it. It reminds me of the like kid who doesn't want to go, do his homework. So then he goes through all this effort to cheat. And it's like, if you would have just put that much effort into doing your homework, it would have come out the same, if not better. But I see that a lot where people are like putting in a lot of effort to avoid something. And in the end, if they had just done that one thing, it probably would have been a lot easier than all the effort they put in to avoid it. So I'm a big advocate on like pushing forward and facing your fears and moving forward with that. My specialty in clinical is OCD. That's like my favorite to work with. And I think it's because my approach is like facing your fear, facing that intrusive thought, facing whatever it is that's controlling your life, and then moving forward with it. But I do think that's a big piece in being human, not to run from fear and not to be mad at it, because it's a part of who we are. We need it to survive. It tells us when a lion's chasing us, or not to eat something that's dangerous, or whatever it is. It's good to have fear, but then to let it rule your life is another whole nother concept of it, and we shouldn't let it rule our lives. So facing your fears or facing your challenges and moving forward, I'm a big advocate for that. But I really think a lot of people, that's a big struggle for a lot of people for whatever reason.
Yeah. So, you've talked about a lot of different things in your approach. One of the commonalities we see from all of the folks that we have on our podcast is the willingness to take action. And I think it's absolutely worth underscoring in your particular story, because Your life changed because you continued to take action. Now, if someone had told you 15 years ago you'd be where you are right now doing what you're doing right now, you probably would have said, nah, that's not going to happen. Maybe you wouldn't have. But what I've noticed, or what we've noticed, is over and over and over again, even the people who have had really difficult things happen in their life, and that's most people that come on the podcast, because most people have really difficult things happen in their life. Like that's just the way life is. What's funny,
Mhm.
we just got done filming an episode, and awesome lady that came on, and she does like a coaching and speaking practice about mindset, and she called the tough stuff in life the spiritual 2x4. I've never heard it put that way. And she said, sometimes you need to be hit with the spiritual 2x4 in order for you to wake up and see what's going on. But I think there's a valuable lesson in your story in that you continued to take action and you impacted your circumstances in largely positive ways, like you've talked about. It wasn't always easy, it wasn't always fun, it wasn't always positive in the moment, but you continue to take action. And one of the things we preach a lot is everybody suffers, but truly successful people choose how they suffer. And I'll use physical fitness as an example for that. Um, Going to the gym or running or eating healthy food all the time, I shouldn't say all the time, but the majority of the time, isn't fun in the moment. So it's a form of suffering, but you're choosing to suffer that way so you don't suffer down the road with health issues that are caused by being out of shape or overeating, by health issues that are caused because you've got too much weight on your body. It impacts your cardiovascular system or your respiratory system or your muscular system. So you can choose the way in which you suffer. And what I've learned in life, and I'm 53, so I'm a few years ahead of you, is that it's almost always better to endure suffering now and delay gratification for down the road, because the payoff down the road for the suffering now is exponentially bigger than the suffering you would go through right now. So, yeah, I want that donut, but I'm not going to eat that donut because I'm trying to make better health choices. You're suffering now by not eating the donut, but now you're in a position where you can go on hikes and you can travel and you've got stamina and you've got energy to go through your day. So the payoff is exponential down the road. I call it the compound interest of life. And I would, with the practice you and your husband have, most people understand compound interest as it relates to money once it's explained to them, but they don't
Yeah.
understand that compound interest of life, of the day-to-day habits that compound over time. Just the little things over time have an outsized reward down the line. I would love to hear both your personal and professional thoughts on my little theory there.
No, I think you're right on the money with it. Like, and hitting delayed gratification, that's a big topic in psychology. And going back to like what builds resilience, the marshmallow test is the famous study on delayed gratification. Don't eat the marshmallow now. And when I come back in an undisclosed amount of time, you'll get way more marshmallows. And the kids that eat the marshmallow right away tend to not go as far in life as the kids who have the resistance to be able to wait for the delayed gratification of more marshmallows. And they followed those kids to see who ended up going to college later on in life and doing better in life overall. And it was always delayed gratification. Now back to like, how do you get that? Or what is that inside a person? That's a big debated topic. And again, I think most of psychology, the answer is either it depends or nature and nurture. And I think
Mm,
it's both for that. It depends and it's nature and nurture, but delayed gratification is a huge piece of life and always pushing forward. Personally, it drives me crazy when people say, oh, you're so lucky with the life that you have. You have a great husband, a good job, and you can travel the world. You're so lucky. And I'm like, it wasn't luck. I worked really, really hard to get here to this point in my life. And for some people, it might be luck. They might just be saying that generally because they were born into a good family or born into a lot of money, where, it was lucky for them to be able to have a life like that. But there's way more people in the world where it's not luck and they've persevered and pushed very hard and had goals to obtain to be able to get to where they're at. I think most people in the world, it's more that than luck, but luck is just easier to say, especially if you're upset with yourself for not pushing that hard to get something you want. Then it's easier to say, oh, they were lucky. That's why they have it, you know? But I really think pushing forward, and when you think of running, one of my favorite things to tell clients is putting the shoes on is the hardest part. Once you put your running gear on and you have those shoes on, you're going to go for a run. Like it's getting the shoes on, not the actual run. As soon as you put your shoes on and take that first step, you're committed. You're going to keep moving forward. It's getting the momentum to go more than the actual like movement and moving forward. You start to self propel, but you have to like pick yourself up and get that momentum going in the first place. And there's a lot of struggle with that for people in general, whether it's like you said, healthy eating or exercising or fixing something or whatever it is in their life that they want to change. The momentum, I think, is a big piece that people either use or abuse. They don't use it at all.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, on the luck thing, I use my athletic career as a good kind of illustration of that. So, is there a certain amount of luck involved? Sure. I was lucky that I was born into an athletic body, right? I didn't have any birth defects. I've been big and strong since I was a kid. Uh, that's where the luck ends, though, because
Yeah.
I was in the weight room when I was 11 years old. I started lifting weights when I was 11 years old. And I started running as a means to become a better athlete, not just running because I played a sport, but on my own, conditioning by myself at 11. And it was not lucky that I was out running the stadium steps when it was 90 degrees out in the summer and everybody else was at the beach drinking beer and trying to screw each other. That wasn't luck. Those were choices I
Yeah.
made that were different than the choices other people made. And I reaped the benefits of those choices. It's not luck. It was lucky that I met my wife. It was absolutely lucky that I met her. I had been dating a girl for 3 years, two of them long distance. And she called me the night before I was coming back to Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and broke up with me. And she was right to. Our relationship was going nowhere. She's a great girl. I have no ill will towards her. I'm glad that she's had a good life. She was right, but I didn't see it and I was upset. And 2 nights later, my friends came and got me and said, "Hey, quit being such a whiner. Come out with us." And I met my wife that night. But that's where the luck ends. The chance meeting was the luck. We have worked really hard to develop a relationship that works really well for both of us over 3+ decades. No luck
Yeah.
involved. No luck
Yeah.
whatsoever involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a big one. My husband and I have a great relationship, but again, not lucky. Lucky we met each other. I agree. But the work that we put into it to have a good relationship and to understand each other and to grow alongside each other, to give each other the space to develop as humans, but then to support each other while we're doing it, that was hard work for sure. And it pays off, like you said, in the long run. We have a great relationship and we're really enjoying life together. But it like you said, took a lot of extra time and effort and the willingness to want to put that in so that that relationship in the long run could be what it is.
Yeah, and again, this is the compound interest of life. My wife and I, our relationship is now kind of the keystone relationship for multiple people on both sides of our family. So we are kind of the anchor that the whole family goes to when there's challenges or problems. It's like, well, let's call Joe and Sherry. They'll know what to do. They deal with this kind of stuff like they're good at dealing with this kind of stuff. Our sons are still, involved in our lives. Our youngest son just got engaged, and his our soon to be daughter-in-law, she immediately said, "Hey, this is the kind of family I've been looking for my whole life. This is," and like she quickly acclimated to it. My parents are now at the age where they need help. Like they're, that at some point in life that shifts where the kids kind of become the adults. And I know you talked about like raising your
Mhm.
cousin, so you've got a lot of experience with that. But like we love all those relationships. Like we care about all those people. We want to be able to provide the kind of emotional stability and anchoring support that we provide. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't done all the things that we've done and put ourselves in the position that we're in now. And so again,
Yeah.
outsized rewards from doing the work every day. And I've never considered it work. That's the great part about our relationship. It was never a sacrifice for me to go be with my wife instead of going out drinking with guys or doing whatever other people do. I always wanted to be at home. If I wasn't working, I was at home because that's where I wanted to be. So I guess from that part, I guess it is lucky that I think about it that way, but it's never been work for me. I've always wanted to be around her. She's my favorite
Yeah.
person.
And picking that person, right? Like you said earlier, you knew who you wanted to be with and you didn't settle. I felt like I did the same thing with my husband. Like
Mm,
I knew the type of person I wanted to be with and I wasn't going to settle for anything else. And again, like you said, maybe it's luck that I found him. But for it to anything beyond that, for that relationship to develop where you enjoy each other's company, I think that comes back from picking the right person to start with, and not settling on that or getting trapped into a situation where you feel like you have to be with this person, which is like you were talking about your parents and the sticking together because of the kids or having to be together because of the kids. Like I saw my mom do that too. Like that's the type of situation that leads to an upsetting home or an angry home. And not that I'm an advocate for divorce, but I do think sometimes the kids are even better off if both parents are happy and everybody's happy. Then it's a much better impact on your childhood than if they're constantly fighting. But to get that relationship, like I think a lot of people miss that piece of how important it is to pick your partner, and to hold your standard with what you want for a partner, and for your partner to do the same thing. They should also be happy in the relationship. And my husband and I, our relationship mimics your relationship a lot with your wife, where we really enjoy our time together to the point that we started a business together. We work together all the time.
right.
And people always joke like, how do you work with your spouse all day long, your computer side by side? And I'm like, we just do our work. We get to have lunch together. We go to each other if we have a problem. Like we just get it done. It's a pleasant day. I really enjoy being in the office with him. But I know, again, like most people would really struggle with that with their spouse, or a lot of people would, maybe not most, but it is a like cultural difference inside our society, whether or not you get along with your spouse and enjoy being at home. But I do think a big piece of that is like who you picked and how much work you guys put into your relationship together. It shouldn't be a sacrifice in the sense of like you're giving yourself up, or you're getting a negative value out of it. It really should be, if you're sacrificing for a benefit for both of you, that's a different story. But overall, you both should feel like you're very supported and in a good relationship. You want to be home. That's a really good sign of being in a good relationship.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. Picking who you want to spend your life with is, I think, the single most important decision you will make in your life. And I will say this to both men and women: you're not going to roll over when you're 70 years old and say, "Oh, thank God you're still good looking." That's not going to happen. What you will do, though, is say, thank God I picked someone who's got my back. Thank God I've got someone
Yeah.
who's been there with me and for me for all of these years, that still deeply cares about me as a person and my well being and my happiness. And at the core of our relationship, that's what my wife and I have: is I genuinely care about her as a person, and I want good things for her. I want her to be happy, and I want her to have a purpose in life that's important to her. And she's exactly the same way with me. And we've always thought about each other in that respect. And so it's never been work for us. I'm not saying it's always been rainbows and unicorns. However,
Yeah.
it's never been work. Like it's never been, well, fuck, I guess I'll do this. It's better than getting an apartment and moving out on my own. Like that's just never ever been a part of our relationship. It's always been what we wanted.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. A lot of people when they ask like, should I marry this person? Clients, sometimes like talk about relationships and stuff like that. And when I worked at the university, especially, saw a lot of those young kids who were ready to get married as they graduate and talking about whether or not they should marry. And one of the things that always stuck with me was if you feel like you had a serious illness and your partner was more than willing to take care of you, and the same for them, you were more than willing to take care of them through the ups and downs, through the worst of the illness and the best of the illness. If you feel like you can give that to each other, then there's a good chance that you can make it through most anything. Because like you said, when you wake up at 70, it's not going to be how good looking are either one of you. It's going to be, oh my God, who's going to help me get out of bed today, or whatever the problem is. But that's your long-term buddy. Like, that's your partner that you want to be with in the long run, is the one that's going to help you make it through life together. And going back to what you said, like picking people is so important. I remember a couple of years ago celebrating my anniversary and thinking, God, like how fortunate are we as humans? Most humans right now get to pick the person that they're with. Not everyone in the world, even now, gets that opportunity and that privilege, really, as a human. But we have the privilege in America, especially for most people here, to pick the person that we're going to spend the rest of our life with. So taking advantage of that fully, pick the right person, use that to your advantage to have a great life. But and know, like, there's so many people in history you read about where it was an arranged marriage, or they didn't have a choice in the culture, whatever it is. And still that goes on in the world today. There's a lot of cultures where it's still very common to not pick who you're married to. But for us here, I feel like we have a distinct advantage to be able to pick that. So using that as an advantage and taking it, that opportunity in, I think that's a really good thing. That our culture doesn't highlight a lot. Like, we kind of take it for granted almost, that you get to be with whoever you want, to the point that we're not thinking about it and we're making bad decisions on who we get to be with.
Yeah, well, and there's a responsibility that goes with that too, right? Where, yes, you get to pick whoever you want, but that means you're also responsible for picking whoever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just stupid clickbait stuff. But I hear like what is the 666 criteria? That I hear women talk about: 6 feet tall and six-figure salary and
Oh,
what's it,
yeah.
six pack or something like that. And then you'll hear the same thing from men, like, she's got to be blah, she's got to take care of herself, she's got to have a certain figure. It's like, I get it. There needs to be some physical attraction. You don't just want to marry, someone that is repulses you. But like those superficial things go away. And you
Mm-hmm.
never know. Like, it was about 20 years ago now. My neighbor, this was back on when dial-up internet was still a thing.
Yeah.
And so I was on the internet. I was taking a college class on the internet, and my neighbor came over and said, "Hey, the state police just called, and your wife's been in a car accident." And she had our three sons with her, and she had been driving down. We lived in New Hampshire at the time. There's a lot of two-lane highways, and she'd been
Mm-hmm.
driving down the highway, and someone went to make a left turn from the other lane and turned into her car. Like, she had no
Ugh.
notice. They just hit her. And so the
Ugh.
car flipped and rolled a couple of times. She was thrown out through the hole where the windshield was. Fortunately, the windshield ejected, and she landed on a grass median, which was good because she's landed on pavement. I have no idea how she would have survived. All of them,
Yeah.
our sons, were buckled into the car. And so I got in my car and I drove at a very high rate of speed down to where it was. And they'd already taken them to the hospital. And I passed our car was just mangled. And I passed our car laying on its side on the highway. And so that was about 5 minutes from the hospital. And I walked in, and all three of my sons were on one table. They were sitting there, and I could tell they were okay. They were clearly shaken up, but they weren't physically hurt. And so they were being taken care of by medical staff. I'm like, good. They're good. One down. Let me go find my wife. And she was just pale. She was in shock. It turns out she was okay, but she had a lot of internal, like, damage. She didn't have bleeding, which was good, but she got thrown out of a fucking car that was going 60 miles an hour. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And the first thing she said was, "This wasn't my fault." And I said, "I don't give a fuck." Like, literally, the first thing I said, "I just want you to live." Like, I didn't care if she walked. I didn't care if I had to push her around in a wheelchair. I just wanted her alive. Like, that was all I cared about in that moment. Don't let her die. Just keep her
Yeah.
alive. I don't give a shit about the rest of it. And like, I get that's an extreme example, but that's really happened to us about 20 years ago. And if you don't feel that way, I don't know. I think you got to take a hard look at it. If you don't have those feelings, I don't know if you're making a good choice, you know?
Yeah, and going back to that spiritual two by four, those moments like that, they'll very quickly highlight what your true feelings are. And those are good moments to figure out, like you said, do I need to take a hard look at this, or am I where I want to be type thing. Not to say that you should do it in that moment, but there's definitely moments in life that give us a glimpse into the reality and highlight important what's important and what's not. For sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, but switching gears a little bit, you've talked about writing books. Let's talk about writing books. What got you into that, and how many have you written, and what do you like to write about?
I'm all over as far as what I like to write about. I another thing that I always felt like at some point in my life I was going to do. I was fortunate that I grew up loving reading. It came very naturally to me. I didn't have to work hard to be good at it, which math, that's another hand. I worked really hard to be good at statistics, but reading, I felt like it came pretty naturally for me. And it was an escape when I was a kid from whatever situation I was in, in the home or whatever it was. But I always felt the ability to escape through a book. And then my grandmother on my mom's side, who I was really close with and am still really close with, she ran this conference in Arizona for my whole life. Like I was 3 when she started it. And it was the Arizona Young Authors Conference. And she was a school teacher, an elementary school teacher her whole life. She careered in it, did like 46 years teaching elementary school. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, she put the time in and she loved every second of it. She just loved it. But she was a huge advocate for reading and writing. And she put together this conference, and it was an annual conference she would invite authors in from, most of them were from the state, but there were some from all over the country that would come in for children's books authors, grades 1st through 6th. And she would invite the schools in, and they could pick a team of 6 students, as many teams as they wanted to send, but a team of 6 students for every teacher. And the students would all have to write a book to come to the conference. And then they would get together and they would share books with other students, what they wrote with other students. And then they would get to break into these workshops with these authors and a few illustrators, and learn about how you become a published author or illustrator in the children's book world. And they would have these small workshops of like 20 kids with an author. And they get to do 3 or 4 of these workshops throughout the day. And then there was a keynote that they got to go to as well, and a pizza lunch in the middle of it just to get a break. But it was all these schools from all over the state that would come in. And I think in the peak of it, we had over 1,000 students that attended, and probably about 60 authors that presented in all of these sessions. And then probably at its smallest in the beginning, it started with maybe 100 students and 10 authors, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew until she retired from teaching and retired from doing the conference at the same time. And that was kind of a sad day for us to see that ending. But at the same time, it was a huge impact. I had a lot of friends growing up who were like, "Oh, your grandma puts that together." I've gone to that a lot. And when I was a kid, I would volunteer to work it. Whether I wanted to or not, I was working it because I was the oldest grandchild. But I did really love it. And as a kid, she would give me the space to attend it with my school if I ended up on the team that was going. So every year I tried to end up on a team that was going. And then if I didn't, for whatever reason with the school, I would end up working it. Most years I went as a student, and again, 1st through 6th grade. So then in junior high and high school, I 100% volunteered it. And I would organize a group of other like friends of mine that I went to school with, other students, to volunteer as well. And that ended up becoming my grandfather, his nickname for me growing up was Monkey. And so they would call my group of friends that volunteered in junior high and high school the Monk Incorporated volunteers. And so after I graduated grad school, with the influence of that conference on me and watching all of these published authors and illustrators throughout my whole life, getting to know them personally and go to dinners with them with my grandma throughout the year, and still connected with a lot of them through, email and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. I always thought publishing was within reach. So again, back to like, partially what you're exposed to as a kid, I could see that publishing was within reach. So my goal was to get a doctorate and publish. Like those were my two bucket list goals when I was younger. And after I got my doctorate, I thought, okay, well, now it's time to publish. So the first book I did was the one I was speaking of earlier with my grandmother, because it was also, she ran that conference for forever and she never published a book. And she always talked about this book she wanted to write called Cricket in the Classroom. And it was based on a true story about this cricket who joined her first grade class one day, and he was hanging out with the students while she was lecturing, and then went out to recess with them. And then it turned into this project with her students where he didn't come back from recess. So they said that he went to travel. And then she got the 5th grade students down the hall to start writing letters to the class, pretending to be the cricket. So for the year, this cricket was like writing to this first grade class as he was traveling the world. And she always wanted to make that into a children's book, as a cute like first grade story. So last summer, I came back to Nebraska to help my aunt and her sister. They live together, my great aunt with her doctorate. They live together now in Nebraska, which is where they're both from. And my grandmother's widowed, my grandfather passed, and my aunt never married. So they're both hitting their late 70s and struggling a little bit on the farm and getting some stuff done. So my husband and I started coming out a lot to help them get stuff taken care of. And then we'd leave a little bit and travel, and then we'd pop back out and do some stuff for them and then leave for a little bit. So while I was out here, she had been talking about, since she retired in 2008, that she wanted to write this book. And I said, you're not getting any younger. Let's get it done. So the first book I published was with her, and it was that Cricket in the Classroom story. And I went through the publishing process with her to figure out how to do it. And that started because I was also writing a book to publish at the same time. So I said, well, I'm already going through the process, so we might as well throw yours in the loop and get them both done. So I published a book. My first book was like, it felt like a practice run for me. It was a sci-fi fantasy, my husband's style of reading book, inspired for him. And I really wanted something for me that was like very loose and easy to, it felt no pressure. Like I didn't feel like I was writing psychology or finance or something like that. I felt like I was just kind of making it up as I went. So I used that as my first publication, and my grandmother's book, I actually illustrated it for her, and we published that book together, Cricket in the Classroom. So those are my first 2 books. And then after that, I wanted to get into psychology. So I wrote, I think the last time we spoke, that book had just come out. But I wrote a workbook for elementary age children to understand and develop emotion. So again, another thing that I saw on Nichen being a clinical psychologist was, if only these humans were taught how to be human as a kid. Like we're missing that in our education system. You get the chart in kindergarten that has the happy, sad, little faces on it. And then it's kind of like you almost start to identify what your feelings are in a very basic surface level form, and then it's gone. They never talk about feelings again. They never talk about being human again, unless you're, a kid who has behavioral issues, and then they're going to like throw it in your face, but it's more like you're causing a disruption and not really like we're teaching you some stuff. And I do feel like the schools have shifted a little bit since I was a kid, and probably since you were a kid, but there's still a niche there. So this workbook I created, I really had teachers in mind to implement this in the classroom, to teach students what emotions are and how to cope with emotions, identify and cope with them, as a really strong foundation for the rest of their life, being a human. But I also created it for therapists. There's a niche or a need really for children's materials inside therapy. There's a lot out there, but there's still a lot that could be developed. So I had that in mind when I was creating this. And then I really wanted, to publish something that could reach out to more than I could as a single therapist. I can only see so many clients, but if I publish a book, there's a lot of people out there who could benefit from it, even if they can't get in to see a therapist. And I can't see everyone in the world. So, benefiting it from that point of view as well. So that book I published was Tilly's Toolbox, and Tilly is the little girl who's learning about her emotions. But the entire book is a workbook. Every page is something to be interacted with the kids. And I've made it where you can make copies for your classroom. I've made sure like the copyright stuff was set up so a teacher could use it for every student and they didn't have to buy a book for every single student. I wanted it
Hmm.
to be as accessible as possible. And I'm currently writing another book with my husband. It's the first book I'm doing with him, which I'm really excited for. And this is on, I call it the coffee table book on investing, but it's like, what is investing, and a little bit more detailed, like how does investing work? What's the history of investing? And then what's the psychology behind it? And then how does that all come together to benefit you so that you can build more wealth and retirement or whatever you need in your life as you move forward? Because whether we like money or not, it's part of our world and it's a part of living. So giving that access to people where they can develop that and move forward. Again, that's like my goal. But to make this one in like a bite-sized form where it doesn't feel like a heavy textbook, that's kind of what my husband and I are working on right now. I think that book will be out in the next like couple of months, but I'm excited for that book to come out as well. So I'm all over the place in the topics I'm publishing.
I'll say.
And yeah, and I think it'll keep going. I plan to continue to publish for the rest of my life. But again, like it was a goal of mine. I enjoy reading and I can see the benefit that it gives people and the ability to be able to reach knowledge without having to go to a class or a therapist or whatever it is. I'm a big believer in providing access to that. So if, again, practice what I preach, I thought I'd get out there and put it out there. I do see a lot
Yeah,
more psychology books in the future.
that's awesome. Yeah, like you definitely covering a wide gamut of things, but I love the fact that that passion that you had even as a little girl has stayed with you your whole life. And again, what did she do? She took action, right? We're going to keep hammering on this because it's so important. If you take action, it will lead you places in life. It might be places you expect, might be places you don't expect, but it'll help you grow and it'll help you build a life that you really like and enjoy. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the business you and your husband started together because it's a it sounds very unique in terms of combining financial planning and investment advice and strategy along with the psychology behind that. Because I think a lot of people's psychology around money is fucked up, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah, and it's a strong emotion it emits,
Yeah.
whether it's reward from making a big gain or the fear of loss, like they're very strong emotions you're dealing with behind money. Um, and that's what got me into it. So while I was going to grad school, my husband was getting into a finance career and he started at Charles Schwab as a call center guy, didn't know much about it. He got the job because he had done some investing on his own, playing around online, but never worked anywhere and was getting a degree in it, but hadn't finished his degree yet. And they asked him, what would make you good at this job? And he's like, well, I play poker online and I can do like 6 games at once and win them all. So I think I'm somewhat good at keeping my cool with money and like making some seeing this, statistics in it. And for whatever reason, that got him the job. So he started a call center and eventually he became a certified broker through them. And then he went into when I left to do we do a residency or they call it an internship. But when I left to do that, he followed me and we went to Reno and I worked for the university for a year in their student health center doing therapy and neuropsychological assessments. And while I was doing that, he was working for high net worth clients through Schwab in an office, which is kind of a niche field there. And he really enjoyed that. And then we decided to, after a few years of being in Reno, I graduated, I went into private practice, and he was still with Schwab, but kind of hitting a ceiling a little bit with them. And he decided we wanted to move back to Arizona. So we came back and he applied, he got a job with Chase. And he said that was the worst job he's ever had. Did not like working for Chase. But he was doing some stuff that was different. He got a life insurance certification and a few other things there and finished his degree. And then I saw this job and it was a firm in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is where our home base is. And we just love Flagstaff, but there was a firm hiring, and I was like, oh, you should just throw your application and see what happens. And he heard back from them, and they were like, we're not hiring. And so he took the job at Chase, and he ended up working there. And while he was there, learning that that wasn't his job, that firm actually called him and said, just kidding. I know it's been a few months, but if you're still interested, we'd like to interview and see if you'd be a good fit for our firm. So he did, and he transitioned over that way. And eventually he got his chartered market technician certification, which is a lot of analysis and studying the markets and the behavior of the markets and a little bit of the psychology behind it. And he became an investment advisor, and he has two jobs with them. He carries his own clientele as an advisor, and then he's on their analyst board. So he's helping determine what stocks advisors are investing their own clients in. So he's an advisor for advisors, and he's an advisor for his own clients. And he was doing that, and that was really taking off. He's been with them for years now. While he was doing it, he was developing his own skill in trading and investing. And he came to me and he was like, I keep hearing this, but now, the more I'm in it, the more I see it's true. It's 90% mentality. Like money, stock market, investing, it's all 90% mentality. And the other 10% is like skill with maybe a sprinkle of luck, depending on what you're looking at. Sure. And so I was like, well, that's very interesting for me. On my side, I don't know if I want to get into it yet. I'm really liking clinical work. And then like I said, as COVID hit, that really shook up a lot of the world. And we all felt that. But I felt that was I started to get more involved with his work and what he was doing, and more interested in financial psychology. And when that hit, I took it as an opportunity to move forward in that field. And I decided we launched our business together shortly after that. And I decided I really wanted to do psychological coaching sometimes you use like a behavioral coach or a wealth coach, kind of falls in between everything. But having a doctorate in the field I saw very unique. Not a lot of clinical psychologists are leaving the field to then go into something else. So for me to be able to transition over and use that skill and give it to something else, again, being fueled by the fact that I was running into so many clients that needed help with this. And he had clients that needed help with this. So we merged together and we call it Ponderosa Knowledge and Wealth. Ponderosa is the Flagstaff piece of it. And then Knowledge and Wealth, because it hits psychology and financial investing both. And we work as a team with all of our clients. So he does the investing side of it, and advising on that, wealth management and tax efficiency or whatever it is that you need there, retirement and stuff like that. And then I work on the psychological side of it with looking at where your investing habits came from, where your approach to finance came from. What is it doing to benefit you? How is it hindering you? What do you need to work through to be able to develop a more financially secure future? There's a lot of moving pieces inside of it, but we found that together we could offer clients more than they could get from a traditional advisor through Charles Schwab or Edward Jones or any of these other, big investment groups that you can work with. Not to say that they're doing anything wrong. We just give it an extra layer for every client, that they have the ability to develop their psychological side of investing as well. And I have published a lot of pieces for other investors, looking at the fear greed cycle and how that impacts investors in trading and making sure that they're better investors. But then again, that applies to every human, whether you're doing the investing or you're the one handing the money over to be invested. So we've made sure that we've attacked it from both sides, in a positive way. But it's, like I said, a very unique niche. A lot of people, when we're out and about, are like, what the hell is a financial psychologist? That's usually my first reaction I get. And I'm like, totally fair. I get it. I didn't know what it was at first either. But it makes sense to me. Like, money's such a big piece of who we are, whether we like it or not. And growing up in poverty, I always had the attitude of money is bad. And then as I got older, I realized it's not good or bad, but it is 100% a part of our society. So if I want to be successful and have a comfortable life, I better figure out how to live alongside it and look at it from a different lens. And so providing that to other people a big piece of it as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so I always looked at money, and I still do, as a utility. Like it's simple to me. It's simply a tool. Like if I have more money, I have more choices in general, and I have more
Yeah.
freedom in general. That's just the way I've always thought about money, because money doesn't motivate me at all. Like if you said I will give you X to do Y, that's not exciting to me. Now, if I really like Y and X happened to be a lot of money, that would be interesting to me. But um, I've negotiated a lot of stuff in my career, and that's I've always been good at it because I'm not easy to rattle. I've always been able to kind of keep my wits about me and stay level headed in most circumstances. Am I perfect? Nope, nobody is, but I'm better at it than most people. And I was kind of explaining this to I at one point I had a group of 12 people, and it was 11 women and me. I don't know how it wound up that way, but it just was that way. And so I said, look, let's think through this logically. I said, there's a dynamic that's different between us. Let me pose this question to you. How many of you in this room would sleep with me for $10 million? And I can't remember. I got three or four women raise their hands. And I said, how many of you would sleep with me for $20? And they said, oh, well, I wouldn't do it for $20. What kind of girl do you think I am? I'm like, no, no, we already established what kind of girl you are. Now it's just negotiation, right? So I framed it in that way so that they would understand it's just an outcome. You're just trying to negotiate an outcome. And that's all money is an outcome of an investment that you're making. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and say that. It's very hard when it's your personal dollars sitting in a bank account and you're watching the graph either go this way or go this
Yeah.
way. Because like you talked about the fear greed cycle, and I've never heard anyone explain it better than Warren Buffett, who said, "When the market is greedy, be fearful. When the market is fearful, be greedy." Right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's a really good approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. He's the king for a reason, right?
Yeah, he didn't just lock into $150 billion, by the way.
He's enjoying his retirement, I am sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he finally passed the torch over there at Berkshire Hathaway. It's super interesting. When do you deal with couples? I'm curious if you have a couple who, let's just say my wife and I came, and I was very bullish on risk, and she was very risk averse. Do well, I wouldn't even ask it that way. How do you deal with a couple like that?
Yeah, actually, this just happened. Last week, my husband and I met with someone, and husband and wife, and the wife was like, I don't take risk. I'm very scared of risk. And the husband was like, I'm very aggressive, and I've grown a lot of my accounts because of that. And that kind of hit the nail on the head right away for me, was like, okay, let's talk about approach. And it's just like marriage therapy. Let's find a place where you both should be comfortable with it. It's not a sacrifice. The husband doesn't get to take the risk, or the wife, does dictates that there is no risk or has to take the risk or whatever it is. But the next step with them really is sitting down and figuring out, and maybe individually, maybe together, depending on what they need, but figuring out why do you like taking risk and why do you not want to take risk. And then from there, let's see, is it good or bad? Like, maybe not taking risk is really important because their accounts are so small, or something big is coming up, or whatever it is. Or maybe taking risk is really good because they need to grow more for their retirement and they have the ability to do right now. And the wife just grew up with not a lot of money, and so taking risk is really uncomfortable for her, and the husband grew up with a lot of money, and so taking risk for him is totally okay. He's totally fine with it. But sitting down and figuring out the psychology behind it, how you grew up with money, both individually, how you're handling it together, and then again, what influences do you have? A lot of people like to say, I don't know why I don't like risk. I just don't like it. And that's not a good answer. It's an answer, but eventually we need to figure out what the I don't know why is. We have to have a really good understanding of why both of you want something a certain way, and then to figure out where we are, where we're comfortable for both of you moving forward. And usually it's somewhere in the middle, some risk, but not a lot. But sometimes it's like, well, I never looked at it from this perspective or that perspective. And I realized I need to take more or I need to take less. And there's some growth inside of it, but developing that mentality around it and figuring out the growth, and then having clarity and like a very strong, whatever your plan is, whether you're working with an advisor or you're doing it on your own, but having some sort of strong plan and clarity and then sticking with it, right? That's where the fear and greed come in. People, like an investment advisor, they'll have a plan, but then emotion takes over and the plan goes out the window and there's no plan anymore. So getting back to like having a clear plan and sticking with it through the ups and downs, through the emotions, knowing delayed gratification, what the outcome is, long-term consistency, all of those goodies that play well into that background, but having that to move forward together as a couple if your finances are together. And maybe sometimes some couples are like, I want two separate accounts, and this account will grow that way and this account will grow that way. And if they're both fine with that, great. If it's a problem, we'll figure it out. But most of the time, eventually, once we sit down and we figure out the why and what's making it uncomfortable for whatever reason, and how can we make it comfortable, and then moving forward with a clear plan and a good advice, whether again it's yourself or with your advisor, it should be very clear on what's happening, and then moving forward with that should be very clear. And a lot of people find that fear or whatever it is settles down, and they come to a happy medium somewhere where they're both in a position that they feel really good about for their financial gains and future and everything else inside of it. But it takes a lot of work, more than what most advisors would do with sitting down and going, well, I think you should just take more risk. And that's how it is. You hear that. We hear that a lot. Like there's no deep understanding of why or how to fix it or how to move forward with something in the middle type thing.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, well, I love your comment about, there's a plan until it gets real and then the plan goes out the window. So that picture right there is a picture of Mike Tyson. It's my favorite Mike Tyson quote, which is everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And
Yeah.
like that's the spiritual, his is a literal 2x4, not the spiritual 2x4. But yeah, it's I started my grocery career at Albertsons. Oh, by the way, I was going to tell you, I actually went to Nevada Reno. That's where I played baseball, at Nevada Reno at the university.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
Yeah.
I lived in
Love
Reno for
that.
2 years. Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
It's a great university.
It is. Yeah. I lived right off of
Yeah.
Virginia Street, like everybody did, right?
Yeah, right there in downtown. It's changed a lot too. They've had a lot of growth and then a lot of change.
Big
Yeah.
time. Yeah. I went back, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years after I was done there, and I couldn't believe how different it was. It was a pretty sleepy little rodeo town when I went there back in the early 90s. But where was I going with that? What was I talking about? The Reno thing popped into my head.
Grocery store.
Oh, yeah. I started at Albertsons, and Albertsons was founded by Joe Albertson, and there was a run on the stock market, whatever, things didn't go well, and his personal holdings in Albertsons, were significant because he founded it, so it made him rich. And whatever happened, and they said, Joe, you lost $200 million today. Doesn't that bother you? And he said, look, I didn't lose anything today because I didn't buy or sell anything today. Like my stock went up or down this much. That's not real. It's paper. It doesn't mean anything today. He said, I lost two hunting dogs in an accident last month. That was a bad day. I don't give a shit about today. And that always resonated with me because it was like, man, that's someone that's got perspective. That made sense to me, that you can make or lose money, you can acquire or sell off things, but replacing relationships is can't be done. Like, I got one wife, she's it. That's it. I've got three sons, that's it. There's nobody else. That's where the truly important things in life are. And I'm fortunate that I've never struggled to keep that in perspective. Now, I'm like anyone else. I have fear. I get greedy. I do I'm not sitting. I always say I don't throw stones because I live in a glass house. I'm not saying anything like that. However, I do a better job than most of keeping those things in perspective, I think.
Yeah. And that takes practice, right? And time and self-awareness and development. And like they've done the studies on monks and their ability to control their brain, for lack of a more I don't developed term inside that, but
Sure.
they've done all these studies on it with meditation, and they've seen that they have way more self-control and physical control than most people have. And I think it's inside the practice of it, right? Like they're sitting and meditating and working through stuff silently so much that over time they develop it. Wim Hof, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's another good example of that. And controlling, his big thing is like controlling your nervous system reaction through deep breathing. That's like him in a nutshell. It's a little deeper than that, but again, practicing it. So, and his is like cold water exposure. Like you get into a cold water situation and the natural response is to like not be able to breathe anymore. Yeah.
Yep.
But if you practice that over and over and over again, you get to a point where you can breathe in cold water and your initial reaction is being able to breathe, not being able to breathe. It feels the same with emotion. The more we're exposed to it and the more we practice staying calm when our nervous system really is kicking off and we're feeling fear or greed or some other strong emotion, even strong emotions that are good, like love and lust, they're very strong and they can cloud our judgment. But if we're very good at like slowing down inside that emotion and trying to take a look around, and staying calm in it, then we can usually have a better reaction and outcome versus just impulsively going forward and letting whatever happens happen, or not being nearly as self-aware in it. But it makes a big difference. And like you said, perspective, that whatever it is that 2x4 that hits you, taking that in as a lesson learned and using that as perspective moving forward, whether it's relationships are more important or money isn't everything. There's a million perspectives you can take that can help with negating and controlling those emotional reactions as well. They're all very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, for sure. How do you guys find clients to work with in your practice?
Clients. Sorry, I didn't. You cut out right there.
No, no, that's all right. So how do you and your husband find clients to work with in your practice?
Oh, a little bit of like going out into the community. Traveling has been interesting. We've started to try and figure out how we're doing this while we're traveling. And we do tend to travel to a place where we know someone. I love being toured around by somebody who's from the area. So that is like my favorite way to travel. Show me where the good food is and tell me everything I should see that's amazing in your eyes. So we do travel to a lot of places where we know someone. We have a friend or a family member or a friend of a friend or whatever. But then we'll also use that to try and get into the community a little bit and offer our services, especially if we're going to be there for a little bit. You talked about New Hampshire. We spent 6 months on the East Coast in Vermont and exploring Massachusetts and New Hampshire and the New England area. Super fun, but put it out there that we were there as we got to know people, whether we were at social events or private events that our friends invited us to. But we would acknowledge at some point in the conversation what we did and why we were traveling and how we make a living. And then that naturally brings it up for people. And my husband and I both are not salesmen. We don't want to hound somebody into something they don't want to do. And being a psychologist, mandated therapy does not work. Like you need to want to change. And it's the same for finance. I feel like you need to want it, whatever it is, you need to want it first. We can't make you want that change. But if you want it and you want help, we are so eager to help and so ready to. And we have such a good knowledge base together and experience together to be able to help people that's what we like bounce off of. And our field with finance and for psychology is the same for me, but word of mouth is best. So we tell our clients, hey, if you know someone else, you think we're doing great, someone else that can benefit from this, then go for it. We do have an Instagram that I try to like publish one thing a week on it, but I'm not a social media person. I'm not like pushing those people that publish like multiple reels a day and multiple live videos, and that's not for us. So it's not that active, but we do keep it active enough that we're there. And if you need to reach us through it, you can. And we have a website that we use. We do go to like some events sometimes, like a fair or something like that. But most of the time it's word of mouth. We are sponsoring, there's a retiree party coming up for the college that my aunt used to teach at, and she was like, hey, do you guys want to sponsor the party, you know, the catering and the room rental for it and stuff like that. So our name will be out there as sponsors for that event, and that will give us some exposure in that area. But again, just doing it to do it more than doing it because we think we're going to get a client out of it. Word of mouth is definitely the biggest for us. Whether it's like, again, somebody we've already worked with, or people who know us, or a family member passing it along, or a friend passing it along that we have this business. But word of mouth has been our biggest opportunity for clients.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love what you're doing. And you'll appreciate this with your psychology background, but I'm a great salesperson. I'm not in sales, but I'm a great salesperson. I've run sales teams before. And I always try to explain to people, you have to learn to sell without selling. If people feel like they're being sold, you're cooked. Like it's not going to work. And
Yeah.
like you had said, you got to want it. I always say you can't push someone up a ladder. They have to climb. Like there's no other way for it to happen. But here's the approach. Like instead of trying to sell a restaurant more lettuce, help the restaurant sell more salad, and they will buy more lettuce from you as a byproduct of that. You have to switch it from you pitching your product to them to you helping them solve their problem. And I always tell salespeople the best thing you can do is ask your customers, what's a problem I can solve for you? Like if you do that and you actually come up with a solution for the problem, you create what I call a sticky relationship because you're no longer a salesperson. You're a consultant, you're a collaborator, you're a part of the business. And that's way different than transacting on price or transacting on utility. And that's what I try to teach to salespeople is you have to take that collaborative approach. Does it take longer? Yes. Is it harder? Yes. Does it yield much more results? Yes. So I think it's worth
Yeah.
it. Again, that's our delayed gratification in real life,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I was just going to say delayed gratification. Always, always. Yeah. And I agree. Like, if you're helping them solve something, it's such a deeper relationship than just pushing something on them, whether they want it or not.
Yes. Yes, totally. So one thing I always do on the podcast, I ask a lot of questions. I'm very curious, and you did a great job of kind of laying your stuff out. You're so good at kind of speaking to things. I really appreciate that. But I can't cover everything, and I always want to make sure I give our guest an opportunity to talk about something I didn't ask them about, or if there's a topic that we haven't talked about that's important to you that you want to make sure we cover for the audience. I just open the floor to you to talk about whatever we want to talk about.
I feel like we've hit a lot. There's so many pieces there, like you had said in the beginning, like to unpack. I feel like I talk forever sometimes, and sometimes I feel like I am talking forever. But I don't know if there's anything in particular that I can think of where I'm like, oh, I really wanted to touch on this today, or I really wanted to get to this. We hit a lot of pieces in a nutshell, and I know it was a nutshell for a lot of it. I think if there's a takeaway for your listeners out there, really, it's like if you want something, go for it. And it never works out the way you think it's going to. And that doesn't mean that you failed. It means you're moving forward like 100%. I pictured myself in like an equine private practice at one point, and I myself working for a hospital at one point, and I pictured myself in all these different roles. And I know that if any of those had come true, I probably wouldn't be traveling as much as I am now. So a blessing in disguise, right? How they always pitch it. It never comes to what you think it's going to, but it's always going to come to something. It has to. That's just like the physics of it. So moving forward and figuring out what your first step is. If it's just putting your shoes on, that's a great step. Like you're getting ready for it. But finding that momentum one little piece at a time and then moving forward. Like we said, it doesn't come overnight. I went to school, I did my undergrad in 4 years, and I did my doctorate in four, which was really fast. A lot of people don't get a master's and a doctorate in 4 years. I took an accelerated program partially because I knew like my finances were limited. So I was trying to get as much as I could finished without having to take on more debt. But overall, like it didn't come overnight. It was still 8 years of pushing to get that one one box checked. And then from there, it's just the beginning. You still have a career that you have to develop, and that's going to change over and over and over again. And other things in life that you want, for me, publishing books or traveling, like those things needed action to get them moving. They didn't just fall in line because I got my doctorate. So the moral of the story, like, it won't happen overnight, but if you're consistent with it, no matter what it is, whether it's weightlifting or running or changing something in your life, going to school, trying to get out of a situation, just one little inch at a time builds up that compound interest like you were talking about. And in the long run, that delayed gratification, sticking with it, will pay off. Like, no matter what, it will pay off.
I love it. I love it. So well said. Well, Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Your story is super interesting, and I love the message that your life story conveys to people, which is if you take action and you pursue things that are important to you, it will lead you to a very good spot in your life. So you're going to keep publishing books. You and your husband have the business going. Let's just stay connected. Maybe we can have another conversation down the road, and we'll cover some of these topics more deeply, and we'll have more stuff to talk about. I'd love that if that's a possibility.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love that too. And thanks
Uh,
for having me. This was super fun. I enjoyed it.
yeah, totally. Absolutely. It was great. So thank you so much, and have a great week.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Doc.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, guys, there we go. So we did not oversell Dr. Rankin in any way, shape, or form. High caliber person, talked a lot about a very difficult upbringing, crazy unique situation in terms of her parentage and growing up in a small town with people who were part of her family that didn't acknowledge that she was part of the family, and how some of those emotions manifested themselves, how she had a deep and burning desire to build a better life for herself, the actions that she took to build that life, and so much valuable stuff in there. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Rankin on the show. She did a great job. And like we talked about there at the end, we'd love to have her back on. So kudos to her, and really appreciate her coming on and educating us and talking to us about all the great stuff she talked to us about. So James puts it up over here every day. Head over to the website, saltygingertalk.com. All the podcast episodes are there. Links to all the social media accounts are there. Publish a newsletter every weekday. You can subscribe to there. Like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast, whatever platform you consume it on. We are awesome at finding awesome people to come on and give you great tips, tricks, advice on how to build the life you want. We keep finding awesome people, and we're going to keep doing it because it's what we do. You don't want to miss the next episode that's going to have great ideas for you to build your life. Make sure you check it out. We will see you there.